From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. My name is Nick Barris. That's N-I-C-K-B-E-R-E-S. I'm the host of this show. I've been doing it for years, and we're back at it again on a Thursday. We're going to take your phone calls, and I'm going to ask you how you think you would go about spending $5 billion. I mean, $5 billion, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's less than that. But that might be something that the city of Nashville would consider doing. Not that necessarily, we don't know how it would be paid for, but doing if we thought that the Titans needed or deserved a new stadium. That's been talked about. And, you know, when you talk about things like this, it also brings up other issues of how that money could be spent otherwise, or all of those. People talking about it. We're not there yet, but it's been brought up, and trust me, that is coming down the pike. The number 737-7587. If you want to join as we talk about that and other money issues in the city with Councilman Bob Mendez. Good morning. I mean, let's see. I mean, $5 billion is small potatoes to you. I know you have that trust fund and everything, and that's good. But for those of us who think $5 billion is a lot of money, Bob, I mean, how would you spend it?
Well, I don't think anybody's actually talking about $5 billion.
Okay. Well, I know. I'm just saying that the SoFi Stadium in L.A., and then, of course, we know the stadium in Texas with the Cowboys.
Well, I mean, one thing you're going to hear a lot from me about the stadium is, I don't know. Like, we got the mayor's office and the team in negotiations, and they dribble out information to the Tennessean every couple weeks, and the rest of us are sitting around trying to read tea leaves. You know, the new stadium in Las Vegas cost about $1.9 billion.
That's the other one, the Thunderdome or whatever they call that.
Yeah, I think it's Allegiant. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
But that was about $1.9 billion. And, I mean, it's a lot of money.
How do they pay for them? I forget the Vegas one. Remember when we built this one years ago? His personal seat licenses helped a lot.
Right.
I don't know, is it usually a combination public-private?
That's what it's been for most of the last generation, is a combination of the two. And you know, we're in a lease now, and we've got, the city's got certain obligations that are a lot related to the existing stadium. And so the question we've got is, should we just honor the existing lease and whatever that price tag is, or should we spend that amount and let the Titans invest some for a new stadium or more upgrades? There's, you know, frankly, a lot more questions than answers right now.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask you, and I didn't want to put you on the spot, and maybe you don't know exactly, but what is the lease? When does it end? When the Titans moved here, they signed a lease or some kind of agreement that locked them in here for, was it 30 years?
It was 25, which we're coming up on.
Right, right.
But they've got a unilateral right to extend it if they want to I think it's 2037, 2038. And so whether it ends after 25 years, which would just be a few years down the road, I think maybe 2025, somewhere around there, or if they want to, they can extend it into the late 2030s.
Oh, sure, but that's not an issue.
Right.
The issue is not them wanting to extend it. The issue would be if that lease came up, and we all know what happened with Bud Adams, rest his soul. His daughter now is involved, and I think she's a very different owner than he was, but how they left Houston.
Right.
So the question would be, after 25 years, and I don't think they would ever consider it because this is a wonderful place, they're like, you know what, it's just not happening for us. We're going to move our team to St. Louis or something like that.
Well, they've, as far as I know, they've never made that threat.
You're right, they have not. I don't want to, you know.
And I mean, never say never, but the idea of the NFL leaving Nashville at this time in our history seems pretty unlikely.
And I wouldn't think that the ownership would want to do that. This is a great place. After what we did with the draft and all this, I mean, it's just getting bigger. But
plus, there's always next year for the Super Bowl.
Right. Is that kind of the thinking behind this? Obviously, you know, I think the stadium is older, but do they want a new stadium because they're thinking, or upgrading this stadium so that we would someday be in a position to host a Super Bowl, where I think we're getting close with our hotel occupancy that we would qualify under the NFL guidelines now, except that we have an open-air stadium?
Yeah, I think the Nashville tourism officials salivate at the idea of trying to get a Super Bowl, and obviously the team would love to host a Super Bowl. You know, I think those of us who sit on their couches every Sunday in the fall and watch the football game, or go to the stadium, I'm sure we all love the idea of a Super Bowl being here, but. And we'd pay, I don't know, I'd pay $10 to have a Super Bowl in my hometown, but how much of taxpayer money would we have to pay to have that be the end result? I'm just not sure that is a goal that I personally value taxpayer money to spend on.
Well, okay, so, and we'll take calls on this and get folks' thoughts as we're kind of focusing on the issue of the stadium and what will happen with it. What are you hearing on your blog? What are you hearing from your constituents? What do Nashvillians think about this? It's been floated out there, and maybe some are clueless, and I think a lot of people don't care until it hits them in the pocketbook. I mean, not everyone around here is a Titans fan. There's just, a lot of them. There's plenty of people that just don't care about football. Well, and they're the ones who are going to say, "Are you kidding me? No, I don't care if the team leaves." There's people like that, which I understand.
The top two things I'm hearing right now are, "Wow, that's awesome! I love the Titans." And the other thing is, can we get my garbage picked up every week before we talk about a stadium?
Right? Is that really, are those things connected?
I mean. You got to crawl before you can walk. Yeah. You know, one of the basic things the city does is pick up garbage. It's fair for people to wonder if we're having problems getting garbage picked up week in and week out. Can you really manage a multi-$100 billion-dollar investment? I mean, that's a fair thing for people to wonder. I do think that the garbage pickup issues will be resolved within the next couple months, and so I think that that feeling from people will fade, and we'll get to the merits of the stadium. But for right now, I'm hearing a lot of, yeah, talk to me after my garbage gets picked up.
Okay. Part of the thing I think the Titans that's floated out there is not just the stadium, but they're talking about developing that area around the stadium more so. Yeah. You know, I mean, isn't there already talk? Do you imagine juvenile justice is going to be moved?
I'm confident it's going to be moved.
It will. I remember when I first started work here, it wasn't long after, I guess it had finally been built. Andy Shukoff was the juvenile court judge at the time. And I remember walking in and saying, this is a glitzy place, and but everyone, even then, 20 years ago, was saying, this is too small.
It was underbuilt. Yeah.
Underbuilt. I mean, it's nice. It's nice. The marble, it's a nice facility, but it's too small.
I think there's a piece of property off of Brick Church Pike near the interstate that Metro has, which is the intended new location.
That's where they'll go. So then they can plow that under. Would the city then be in a position to say, all right, let's get with the Titans and let's develop, say, where that is as a restaurant row or something? What do you think is happening there?
I mean, Nashville is uniquely situated in that we've got several hundred acres of city-owned land on a major downtown riverway, and I think it's destined, and there's development all around it that we've seen already.
Yeah, some of the hotels have been redone. I mean, now keep in mind, now you're talking heading north maybe from the stadium, right? Because Steiner Lift is still there, and that's not going it's is it?
I mean, I think even the parking lot areas and what Metro owns is, I don't know, I forget the exact number, but it's a couple hundred, it's several hundred acres.
Okay, yeah.
And that the city owns in the immediate area around, and you know, the Oracle campus is being built a little bit to the north, which will have many parking spaces that go along with the Oracle campus. And so I think the dream from the mayor's office and the team is to turn what is currently surface parking into a mid-rise mixed-use residential and restaurant neighborhood where parking is more in garages that are stacked.
So you have more space.
And it is a core part of the deal, as I understand what they're trying to work out, is that they want to have a development there in the immediate area, so you have property tax and sales tax revenue that can help pay for building the neighborhood and paying for the stadium. So it's a core feature of the deal that they've got cooking, is to develop the parking lot area into a neighborhood that has mid-rise office and
tentatively speaking,
buildings.
how is that done? I mean, this is part of their discussion. The Titans wouldn't necessarily do this. I'm guessing they've lined up or would line up then developers who would then say, okay, yeah, I want to build this here, and I build this here, and then They set it up?
It's been quite some time since I've gotten anybody to update me on this, but I think it's city-owned land right now.
Okay, so the city can decide who comes in.
And so the city is essentially the developer. I think the team would like to own some of the land in the immediate area of the stadium. Status of those negotiations, I have no idea.
And okay, just so we're clear, who owns the stadium right now?
Stadium is owned by Metro, leased to a company affiliated with the team.
Okay, that's it. But it's leased, and they pay for it. But the property, the ground you walk on, the stadium itself, is owned by the city, but it's leased by the Titans.
And one of the most important things to understand about the dynamic is in that lease 25 years ago, in the late 90s, it requires Metro to pay for all capital improvements and upkeep, major upkeep on the stadium. And so it was a stadium, you know, it's ancient history now, but it was a stadium built relatively cheaply back in the 90s. It was a $200 million stadium now, and like, you know, now new stadiums cost over $1 billion. And so Metro has a substantial obligation if we do nothing. And in fact, in a lot of ways, the doing nothing is a pretty expensive route, because if we said, okay, no deal, like that's a good enough stadium, carry on to the end of the lease term, the Titans could appropriately say, well, guys, there's $100 million worth of improvements that need to happen.
There must be criteria. That it's written into that lease, you're right, that they have to do upgrades or maintenance. I don't know how far they go. I can't imagine that involves, okay, you don't do it. Well, still, under our lease, you got to put a roof over this. I mean, I don't think that would be in there. Where's the criteria? There's got to be a line, because they just can't ask for anything. Yeah, and it was standard language in NFL leases at the time that's been abandoned because it turned out to be unworkable. But Metro is required to maintain the building in a, quote, first-class condition. It's objective there.
Then first-class condition is tied to what comparable facilities are like. And comparable facilities was defined as stadium is built plus or minus 10 years of our stadium. So what you're supposed to do to decide the standard is run around and find the stadiums that were built 10 years plus or minus our stadium, see what they look like, and we're supposed to build to that.
That's interesting. Okay, great answer. I was wondering how that works out. And by those standards, look, it's fine. I was there this last season, but this stadium, compared to what you just described, the 10 years since, it's a dinosaur. It's just a dinosaur. It's not there. You know, one way or the other, there's got to be upgrades or a new one at some point, or they're going to start calling for it, right?
And Nick, to that point, in the lease, they went and listed out 10 quote-unquote comparable facilities, and not all of them are still standing.
Oh, really? Oh, my gosh. All right, we'll take a break on that. Now, if you got a thought on this and what you think about that, I know we have a few calls, 737-7587. Any questions about this or comments? Councilman Mendez here as well, so we'll be back with more right after this.